and for another episode of the Servant Leader Coaches Bible Study. I am your host, Coach Chelsea, and y'all, tell y'all now, I do this on many different episodes that I try my best not to be biased, but I'm gonna be biased today. It's another one of those family go way back conversations with the servant leader I have on today. We've been off for a minute, just kind of taking a breather, letting God do some things, because one thing I will tell you as a servant leader, you cannot pour from an empty cup. So your girl been resting a little bit, but what way to come back and to come back with the servant leader we have on the day. Today, we have servant leader Brian Acuff. He is a Blue Bear from Livingstone College, family member of mine. Who you with? Let's go. Shout out to Livingstone College, CIAA, Salisbury, North Carolina. He was the starting quarterback, y'all, when I was there. We'll get into that. He's also a godly husband. He's a godly father. He's an amazing servant leader. And more than anything, I'm proud to call him a friend of mine. So Brian, I just want to take time. I tell people this all the time. Time is that one thing. It's a gift, right? Once it's given, I can't go and let you return it back at Walmart. It's been given away and you gave it so gracefully. So I thank you for your time, brother. And I'm going to pass the torch to you to say hello to our listeners so we can jump into this conversation today.
Yeah, so like you said, I'm super excited to be on. My name is Brian Acuff. I am a Blue Bear. And I'm just excited to see where this conversation goes. I do love God. And I know that the reason I'm in this position I am today is because of him. So at the end of the day, let's get rocking and rolling. And I'm excited to see where this goes.
I love it. I love it. And then, of course, naturally, we're going to give this scripture for today. And I love it because it comes, and we're going to talk about it, y'all. My awesome shirt, Pray Hard, is going to come from there, from Eternally Equipped, from Brian. We'll talk about that too. But it's going to come from Ephesians 6:18. And it says, with all prayer and petition, pray with specific requests. And we're going to talk about that in a second. Specific requests at all times, on every occasion, in every season, in the spirit, and with this in view. And one of the things I say specific, Brian, and we've been talking off script on this, but so often I feel Coach Yo, she is the women's basketball coach at Ole Miss, and she's a servant leader. She always says her tagline, no ceilings, right? And before we jump into the first questions I have for you today, this scripture was amazing to me, and what I told you is confirmation, because when she says no ceilings, I laugh all the time about how perfect the God we serve is. Yet we find a way to put ceilings on him. We find a way to say, well, I would pray and ask about this, but I'm not going to ask that because I don't. No. He asked us to make these prayer petitions specifically and make those requests known to him. Yet so often we feel that this perfect man we have to tailor make them, or we have to pull back from the things that we can ask him. And so when I read that, when I put this shirt, when you blessed me with it and I adorned it and put it on my back this morning, I was like, God, thank you. Thank you for the reminder through Brian and this amazing apparel, Christian apparel, that I can ask you for specifically what I want. And I know I pray in faith and I believe it's going to come to pass. I love that.
Powerful.
It is. Brian, many times, and I say this in the way that my grandma says all the time, that, she kept me in church. My mom kept me in church, taught me about who Christ was. My grandpa, same way, chairman deacon, chairman mother, all that, right? And I knew him. I learned him through them. Like, they made sure when the doors of church were open that we were there, right? But I always say, baby, this is what we were supposed to do to fill your, foundation. But you got to learn him and know him for yourself. I want you to talk to us a little bit and open this conversation up about your path to learning Christ for yourself and how you build upon that relationship every day.
Wow. So I was praying this morning about leading me in the direction that it's supposed to go, right? And this exact question came up during prayer, and it was all about foundation. And so I was raised Catholic. My mom is a devout Catholic. And so I went to church every Sunday. So I'll preface it this way. I knew who Jesus was at that point, but I didn't know who he is, if that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense.
As I reflected on my journey, I realized that, wow, it's one thing to know who Jesus was. It's almost like historical at that point. But when you don't really understand and don't have that true relationship with him, you don't really know who he is. And so I feel like when I finally got to college and I got around you, who invited me to church for the first time, and Fluker, as we're holding pinkies and praying before a meal, which was something I'd never done before. And
Shout
I'm
out to
like,
Fluker.
yeah, but it's like, wow. So who Jesus is another completely different side of it, you know? So we talk about foundation and how we grow up and we're raised in the church or whatever that is. Some people give their life to Christ and they know who he is very early. I mean, for me, it was 2010 when I finally got to know who Jesus is and have a intimate relationship with him. So I would just say that the journey's been long. Fortunately, my mom did have me in the church, so I had a foundation and nowhere to go back to. But I feel for a lot of people that maybe don't know who he is or never even have heard of him. And so I feel like we have an opportunity as Christians to share that and to not be afraid to share that because somebody might be searching for him and we're here to help.
And I think that's the biggest piece, right? I tell people all the time, especially with this being a sporting platform, that I'm a recruiter. I'm a recruiting coordinator. You know, we have those on every team. I'm a recruiting coordinator for Christ, right? And we know what that looks like, especially as athletes. And even if not, you've been recruited for a job, you may be recruited for a service, whatever the case may be, you know what it looks like to be recruited. You know, information is given. You know that the persistence in communication happens. You know that you watch them model. They tell you about the background. They tell you about their organization. They tell you all of these things, not to fluff up or try to present it in any way that's not true, but to ensure that you have something that's valuable to this organization. You have something valuable to the upbuilding of this kingdom. And so with that being said, it makes it so easy to, you know, remember who God is in that. And it is our job to be able to know and say, hey, we got to make sure that we are representative and shed the light. That's what I tell all the time, people. We have to be the light so that people can find him through us.
So true.
It's so amazing. You know, Brian, I want to skip forward now. You talked about Fluker and me and hanging out, eating and going to church together, but we all met, of course, because we were athletes at Livingstone College, right? And in that, you know, we know what it takes to build a regimen, to be successful, to be on top of our game all the time, right? And so, you know, in that, I want you to take a little bit of time to talk about how you got to Livingstone College, right? And I tell people this all the time, you know, it's amazing the people you meet because shout out, y'all see Brian, okay? Livingstone College is an HBCU for those that don't know that, right? And Brian was our starting QB. The work ethic was insane. Talk to us a little bit about how you chose Livingstone College. And then of course, naturally, how, you know, you allowed yourself to become the starting QB and what that work ethic took for you to stand in that position.
So this question's got several parts to it. So let's start with how I got to Livingstone.
Sure.
So my parents are retired military. So they retired in Salisbury. And so I got to go to high school and middle school in Salisbury at West Rowan. And I did play football. I played basketball, played baseball in high school, and then got to go to college. And so at first, you know, there's a time in your life where you think you need to go where you want to go versus where somebody wants you to go. And so I initially started by going to ECU. I was a gray shirt walk-on. So I was out there on the practice squad, but then I got in a bunch of trouble. You know, I got involved with the wrong crowd and had several opportunities to correct that, but I never did.